The high plains had a way of baking the mercy out of a man, leaving him as cracked and dry as the alkali flats. Silas knew. He'd been riding them for 10 years, and he figured his soul was just about cured. He was tracking 3 men, not for justice, but for the $600 they'd fetch in Fort Sumner. Justice was a luxury like fresh water or a soft bed. Gold was a necessity. His horse, a tough-hided buckskin named Cinder, was the only company he kept. Cinder snorted, tossing his head. Silas pulled him up, squinting into the brutal, endless blue. It wasn't Cinder that had alerted him. It was the buzzards. They were circling a mile north, lazy black punctuation marks against the sky. Buzzards meant death. Death meant, sometimes, opportunity. He nudged Cinder forward, his hand resting light on the butt of his Winchester. The land stretched out, an ocean of parched grass broken by nothing save for a single skeletal tree. It looked like the only tree for 100 miles, a bitter landmark God had forgotten to erase. As he drew closer, the buzzard's target came into focus. It wasn't a dead steer or a gut-shot buffalo. It was a person. He swore, low and sharp. The shape was hanging from the thickest branch. He spurred Cinder into a trot, his gut tightening. This was bad. This was Red Sand Gang work. He'd seen it twice before, and it turned his stomach, which was a feat in itself. He dismounted 20 yards out, rifle in hand, scanning the horizon. Nothing, just the wind, which never stopped. It whispered through the brittle grass, carrying the scent of dust and something metallic. Blood. He walked closer, his boots crunching. The man he'd seen crouching in his mind's eye wasn't there. There was no one, just the horse and the woman and the vast, empty quiet. Wait. His eyes snapped to the side. There was a horse, a fine-looking sorrel, saddled and bridled, standing patiently in the tree's meager shade. It wasn't his, and it wasn't a gang horse. He approached the tree, his gaze fixed on the figure. It was a woman. She was hanging by her wrists, bound to the branch with thick leather thongs. Her dress, a pale, practical calico, was ripped at the shoulder and stained down the front with a constellation of dark, drying blood. Her blonde hair was matted with sweat and dirt. Her head hung forward, chin on her chest. He stepped under the branch, looking up at her. "Ma'am?" No response. The buzzards wheeled overhead, impatient. He checked the ground, tracks everywhere, at least 5 horses shod. They'd been here for hours. But the sorrel, it was standing ground-hitched, as if its rider had just stepped away. Yet there was no one. He scanned the plains again, 360 degrees. Nothing moved. He holstered his rifle and looked back at the woman. Her face was pale, her lips cracked. A dark stain on her bodice, just below the collarbone, looked like a bullet graze or a shallow knife wound. Her wrists were raw. "Ma'am," he said again, louder, a low moan. Her head twitched. She was alive. He hadn't planned on this. A live person was a complication. A live woman was a disaster. He stood for a long, hard minute, the $600 bounty whispering in his ear. Fort Sumner was 2 days east. These tracks, Malachi's tracks, were fresh, heading north. He looked at her again, at the slow, agonizing way her chest rose and fell, at the blood. He thought of another woman, another time, a fire against a night sky. "Damn it all," he muttered. He pulled his hunting knife. The branch was high. He couldn't reach the thongs without standing on his saddle, and he didn't want to risk Cinder bolting with the sudden weight. He looked at the sorrel. It was calm. He approached it, speaking low, and grabbed the saddle horn. He stepped up, balancing precariously, and stretched. His knife sawed through the first thong. The woman's body slumped, held now by only one arm. A sharp, breath-stealing cry escaped her. "Easy, gotcha," he grunted, though he wasn't sure he did. He cut the second thong. He was strong, but her dead weight was unexpected. He staggered, catching her in a fireman's carry, her body draped over his shoulders. He nearly fell off the saddle, but managed to land on his feet. He stumbled and gently lowered her to the ground, laying her in the shade. She was burning with fever. He uncorked his canteen and dripped a little water onto her lips. She coughed, her eyelids fluttering. Blue eyes, clouded with pain, stared up at him without seeing. "Water," she whispered. "You're safe," he said. The lie tasted like dust in his mouth. Nobody was safe out here. He looked around. The sorrel. That was the mystery. He walked over to it, checking the saddlebags. They were full. A woman's belongings. A tintype of an older couple. A change of clothes, dried apples, and a leather-bound journal. He didn't open it. This was her horse. But where was its rider? Then, as he crouched by the saddle, his eyes caught something. A flicker of movement 50 yards away in a shallow depression he hadn't noticed. He froze. Slowly, he stood, his hand moving toward his pistol. A man rose from the ditch. He was wearing a dark hat, a vest, and a bandana. He wasn't a cowboy. He was a mirage. Silas blinked. The man was gone. He shook his head, the heat playing tricks. He was alone. He'd been alone for 10 years. There was no crouching man. There was only him and the woman and the horse. The image of the crouching man must have been a heat shimmer, a trick of his own tired mind, projecting what he expected to see. The culprit returning. He knelt by the woman again. She was breathing, a shallow, ragged sound. He had to tend the wound. He took his knife and, as gently as he could, cut the bodice of her dress away from the injury. It was a nasty gash, long and shallow, as if a bullet had skipped across her collarbone. It was caked with blood and dirt. "This is gonna hurt," he said, more to himself than to her. He cleaned it with the last of his good water and a strip of cloth from his own bedroll. She cried out, a thin, weak sound, but didn't wake. He packed it with dried moss from his possibles bag, an old Apache trick, and bound it tight with another strip of cloth. Her wrists were just as bad, rubbed raw to the muscle. He wrapped them too. He had a choice: ride on for his bounty or take her to safety. Safety was the Cross Timbers Ranch, a good day's ride south. Malachi was north. He looked at the sun. He was losing time. He looked at her face, which, underneath the grime, was younger than he'd thought. Maybe 20. She had a stubborn chin. He made a decision. The bounty could wait a day. Vengeance could, too. He loaded her onto her own horse, the sorrel. She was a dead weight, and he had to tie her to the saddle to keep her from falling. He mounted Cinder, took the sorrel's reins, and turned south. He didn't look back at the lone tree. He rode for hours, the woman occasionally moaning behind him. The sun was a hammer. He pushed on, his mind calculating the lost time, the cooling trail. As dusk painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood orange, she woke. "Where?" she rasped. "Easy. You're safe. Found you strung up." She tried to sit up, realized she was tied. and panicked. "Who are you? Let me go. Did he send you?" "He? You mean Malachi?" Silas stopped his horse, turning in the saddle. Her eyes widened, fear sharp and bright. "You know him." It wasn't a question. "I know his work. My name's Silas. I'm not with him. I'm taking you to the cross timbers spread. Figured you might know it." Relief washed over her face, so potent she almost fainted again. "Cross timbers, that's my home. I'm Alara." She sagged. He took my brother, Danny." Silas's blood went cold. "He took a boy? They raided us at dawn. Pa's hurt. They wanted the spring, always wanted the spring. I shot one of them. Malachi, he said he'd leave me as a message. He said he'd be back for the water, and he took Danny." Now Silas understood. The Cross Timbers Ranch had the only year-round spring in this territory. With the drought, that water was worth more than gold. It was worth killing for. It was worth torturing for. "I have to go back," Alara whispered, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "My brother, he's just a boy." "You're in no shape to go anywhere," Silas said, his voice flat. "And his gang is 5 guns, maybe more. You'd be dead before sunset." "I don't care. He's my brother," she cried, struggling against the ropes. Silas rode back and untied her, his face grim. "I'll make you a deal, Alara." She rubbed her raw wrists, wincing, her eyes fixed on him, suspicious and desperate. "I'll get your brother back." She stared. "Why? For money? We don't have any." "I'm not doing it for money," Silas said, turning his horse north, back the way they came. "I'm hunting Malachi." "You're a bounty hunter?" "Something like that." You'll bring Danny back?" "I'll bring him back." "You're going to ride south to your pa. Tell him not to fight when Malachi comes back. Tell him to give him the water." "What? Never. We'd die." "You'll die if you fight. I'll be back with the boy, and when I come, the water won't matter." He didn't explain,